Okay, thank you everyone for coming, for tearing yourself away from the sun to be here. I'm Rosie Scammell. I'm a journalist based in Rome, originally from the UK. And today I'm going to be talking to you about The Local, which is a Swedish news organisation that's been in Italy for 2 years now, almost. And I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then hopefully there'll be a bit of time left that we can talk, have a bit of a discussion rather than just a Q&A. So the talk is about how to set up a foreign news organisation in Italy. First of all, The Local is and how we came to be here. So The Local has existed for 10 years. It was set up by two British guys in Stockholm, originally sending an email about Swedish news in English from their bedroom. It's then expanded, and we've now published over 100,000 articles, which have been read by over 100 million people. And where are we? So from that original base in a Swedish bedroom, we've now expanded to 9 European countries. We've gone from Sweden to Norway, to Germany, to Switzerland. We had quite a significant expansion in 2013 when we moved into France, Spain, and Italy. And then last year we moved into our newest markets, Austria and Denmark. So who reads The Local? So our audience is made up about 4.5 million unique visitors to our pages every month. About half of those are in Europe. The rest are all over the world. So for our Italy site, the largest group of readers are actually in the US. That's followed by readers here in Italy, and then in the UK, Canada, Germany, and elsewhere. Our readers are made up of a whole bunch of different people. They could be foreign residents here in Italy, for example, people who are thinking about making the move. They could be diplomats, other foreign journalists often come to us for story ideas and just to check out what's happening. And visitors, people who would be holidaying in Italy, in whichever country they're reading The Local on. And of course, citizens. We have a huge number of Italian readers as well. So how is The Local viewed around the world? We regularly appear on international, national TV, radio, in print or online media, talking about the stories that we write. So Italy, for example, myself and my colleague have appeared on the radio and TV, that sort of thing, in the US, in the UK, in various other countries. And our articles are often quoted in different languages. So we've been quoted in Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, Czech, etc. It's quite remarkable where stories go from Rome. So then to sort of focus for a few minutes after that brief introduction about The Local generally, it would be good to talk to you about how we came to be in Italy and why we decided to move into this new market. So The Local had a strategy of moving into the main Western European countries which didn't have English as a native language. So we're not in Ireland, we're not in the UK, but we are in all of the countries that we talked about before. Italy was chosen for that reason, but also because there's a very significant English-speaking community here. That's not only the foreigners, such as myself, that live here, but also the Italians that are increasingly learning English. And there's a huge global interest in Italy as a country, which is remarkable considering the size of the country. So that was the main decision about why we decided to launch here. And then the big question was, where do we go? So should we go to Milan? Should we go to Rome? Milan obviously is the financial capital, but we're not a financial news service. So we do cover business news, but Rome is Rome. Rome is the capital, it's where the government is, it's where the diplomats are, it's where a lot of the English speakers are going, it's where the UN agencies are, etc. It's also where most of the foreign journalists are, aside from the financial journalists. And from a staffing point of view, that made it attractive because not only in terms of recruiting full-time staff, but freelancers, it was just a practical decision there. So once we decided on Rome, we had to set up a business in Italy, which is not the easiest thing to do. So for that, the most important thing was to find local experts to help us out. So we hired an Italian HR company to do all the contracts and help out on that side of things. There was the Swedish Trade Council, who were incredibly helpful in making sure that all of the right boxes were ticked, all of the right forms were picked up. And then we needed to find a bureau, which was just in terms of sort of getting on Google, searching for office space in Rome, and then our managing editor coming down from Sweden to go and see all those offices and find one of them that was suitable. And then also it came down to recruiting. So we needed to recruit myself as a journalist and an editor to run the Italy site. We recruited through UK job sites, because of course being English language, and our own websites, and then also social media. So then it came to the next stage, launching the local.it. So with the local.com, we have our country-specific sites. So in some ways, this was the easiest part of launching the news organization, because we'd already been doing it for 10 years. So it was just a matter of replicating the model, making sure that we had a hell of a lot of content to launch with. So in the months running up to launching the Italy site, we had journalists writing features so that when we launched and we had our first day of news, our readers didn't arrive, read the first 3 articles, and that'd be it. So we already had that content ready to go. So when we launched in June 2013, there was Angela Giuffrida, who's the local Italy editor, myself, and James Savage, the local's managing editor, who was here for a few days to make sure that it all went smoothly. And that was all accompanied by a big marketing campaign. We spoke to a lot of English language media press about what we were doing in Italy. And we pushed everything through our network, whether that was our newsletters, our social media, our websites, and all of the other countries. So that's how it was nearly 2 years ago. So what have we been doing since? So daily life at the local. Between myself and our editor, we publish around 10 stories on Italy every day, 5 days a week. At the weekends, it's less, but Monday to Friday, about 10 a day. And this is a mixture of daily news, of features, analysis, galleries, lists, what have you. Some of our articles we source, thankfully, from AFP, the news service. Some days we don't have any of those articles of the 10. Some days you might have 2 or 3, etc. It really depends on what's happening. The 2 of us source all of the photos and edit all of the photos and publish everything directly from our desks in Rome. We also run the social media, which is a Facebook and a Twitter account. We have those specific for Italy, but then they also feed into the European-wide ones. In terms of how we operate, there are a couple of ways that the local operates as a European news service that is quite unique compared to newspapers, other online services, news agencies, etc. We have a Skype newsroom. So all of our journalists, if they're not out on a story, if they're at a desk, they will be in a Skype chat conversation, which we find is the quickest way to share information and stories. So I can be talking to our editor in Berlin, in Madrid, in Paris, etc., all together or sort of one-on-one. We also run a Google Hangout every morning for about 10 minutes with our editors across Europe, which has just been really useful to share pan-European stories and figure out who's going to be taking the lead on that, how we can cover it as a news service across Europe, then also which countries is a story more specific to, and whether there are some countries where it's really essential that we're covering that issue. So over the last couple of years, we've encountered some challenges in working in Italy and working with the local here. To sort of break it down, I'll first look at the challenges of working as a new online news organization in Italy, and then some challenges to working as a foreign journalist in Italy. So first of all, the biggest challenge we've encountered has been the internet. We're an online news service. The internet in Italy is the slowest, the worst out of most European countries. So this has meant that sometimes we've had internet blackouts at our office, at our homes, at the Foreign Press Club in Rome, where the internet you would hope would be working most of the time. This makes it incredibly frustrating, but you can just hope that it will come back, and it does come back. But it's something that I think is uniquely Italian, and our colleagues certainly in Stockholm aren't very understanding when it does. Other things that have been a bit difficult, I suppose, is in being new, is that whereas news organizations in Rome or in Italy in general would have had correspondents turning over for a few years, but generally would have been present in Italy for decades, we've been here for 2 years. So when it comes to getting the highest profile interviews, if we go to the government and say, we want to speak to Renzi, we want to speak to the minister of this, that, or the other, they're a little bit uncertain. So in that sense, that's proved a little challenging. Our model means that we are operating both as foreign correspondents in the old school fashion and also as news agencies. So we're trying to do both what, for example, the Times correspondent would be doing and what Reuters would be doing at the same time. This isn't something that is Italy specific, but it's something that we realize is sort of a big thing to overcome. Some things about working in Italy. As well as the internet speed, there's the speed at which the government works, which is much slower than other European governments. This is very sort of noticeable, I suppose, when there's a big global or European news event. So examples would be the plane crash in France recently, the terrorist attack in Tunisia. After these sorts of events, many governments within an hour or 2-3 hours maximum will release a statement. Also, their foreign ministries will be very forthcoming in giving the information they want to give, how many of their nationals were there, what they're doing about it. With the Italian government, you can be waiting for hours and hours, if not days. And so when you have colleagues in France putting out the French leader's perspective and colleagues in Berlin putting out the Germany's point of view on the situation, it can look like the journalists down in Rome are sort of slacking off a bit. We've also had to adapt to the opening hours that go with Italy. So we start our day between 8 and 8:30 in the morning. It's very difficult to get hold of anyone at that time. Normally, if you phone a city hall at 8:30, there won't be anyone there, certainly not the press office. If you phone them at 9:30, they'll tell you to call back. Someone will pick up, but they'll tell you to call back after 10. And then between 12:30 and 2:30, it's again very difficult, and some shut down for the afternoon. Courts, for example, Vatican press offices. So we have to try that a little bit harder to get comments when the offices are all shut. We, like any other foreign journalists, we keep a very close eye on the Italian press and what the Italian media are doing. There's some excellent Italian journalism going on. A challenge that we've faced here, I would say, is the difference of information sometimes. So, for example, the other day I was reading an article about an Italian woman that died. The headline said that she was 27 years old. The top line said she was 25. So it's sort of a bit difficult to know what the accurate information is here. And then equally if you're working between a few different newspapers, occasionally the names can change, or the sort of the key facts that you're looking into. A note on Italy as a country. I would say that probably more than any other European country, Italy is a country of distinct regions. So Italy is not just Italy, but Italy is 20 very individual, unique places. And so if you speak to people in Sicily, they'll proudly tell you that they're Sicilian, and they may not like people in Rome very much. If you speak to people in Florence, they're Tuscan, they're Florentine. And so for us, it's been important to make sure that we do as much as we can to make sure that we're doing justice to all of the Italian regions, even though we're based in Rome. And due to our schedule, it means we can't go out, we can't sort of do a few days here and there and cover all the regions. So we've certainly tried our best to make sure that we're not just covering Rome, we're not just covering Lazio. So after all of that, to talk about some of the positives of the last 2 years in working with the online model in Italy, and also just about being here as foreign journalists. As I said before, we're managing the Local Italy site from Rome. We don't have to go through Sweden, through Stockholm, to publish our stories. This means that we can be much faster than most news organizations. I suppose the most recent example of this would be last night when I got a flash on my phone that up to 400 people were thought to have drowned off the coast of Italy. Within a couple of minutes, I was on the phone to our editor, well, within a few seconds, I suppose, rather than minutes. And while we were on the phone, I was publishing that news online, and my editor was putting it out on all of our social media. This is a huge advantage, I think, that there's no matter how quick you can be as a correspondent in Rome, if you have to report first to your desk, then it means that you're going to lose at least a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Because we put out more stories than correspondents based in Rome and more stories on Italy than the news services, it means that we are very grateful that we have the advantage of giving a somewhat broader perspective on Italy, because we don't have to ignore all of those great little stories, because we have more than one story that we're allowed to write every day. We can put up 10, so we can cover those sort of niche little things that are happening down in Calabria or up in the mountains in the north or something like that. So that's been great. I've really enjoyed doing that, and I think that's been appreciated from our readers. In running our social media, even though most journalists are on Twitter and that sort of thing, by running our social media sites directly, not only our personal pages, we have a very direct line to our readers, which is great. It means that essentially you can respond directly to all the really harsh criticism. So you know exactly when you publish a story, if people don't like it, they will tell you about it. They'll leave you a big, long Facebook comment. They'll send you a message. They'll slate you on Twitter, this sort of thing. And that's meant that then when we have comments on our articles, or generally about the service, the new service that we're running, we're able to engage with those readers. I've certainly had some great conversations where someone's readers have come back and very critical about something that we've written, and then talk through what we've done and why they're not so keen on it, and then actually we sort of come to a bit of an understanding. It's also nice because we do have positive things every now and then, so it's nice to hear what's working as well from our readers. And that also means, because we have this close relationship with our readers, is that I find they're more likely often to come to us with their personal stories. This may be because they know that there's a couple of us on the ground in Italy. We're not as big as the news organizations that have been around for decades and decades. So we're smaller. It's perhaps not so scary to approach us as it might be to approach the BBC or someone else. And I suppose a couple of examples of when this has happened would be very shortly after we launched, actually, a family came to us and told us that their son had gone missing in Sicily, and it turns out he had died, been buried, and the authorities hadn't told the family. So we sort of looked into this and reported on it. More recently, we reported on the case of a British woman who had a very violent death in southern Italy, which had largely gone unreported in the international press, and spoke very much with her family. So these are some ways that we sort of are closer to our readers, and it really shows in our content that we produce. A bit about working in Italy and what makes that really great for a foreign journalist. First of all, I find that foreign press are more respected in many ways than the Italian press amongst Italians. So I've certainly been at a couple of protests and big marches, rallies in Rome, where the crowds have been specifically chanting against journalists. And then, as a journalist, having to go and talk to those people and ask them questions can be a very nerve-wracking experience. But then they realise, oh, actually, you're a foreign journalist. We weren't talking about you. But this also is sort of a broader thing. When you go to the coffee bar in the morning, people are much more likely to spark up a conversation with you. They'll openly be debating what's just happened in Italy. If you try and speak to people on the street, then generally people will talk to you. They're kind of interested in what you're doing. They have an opinion on the main story of the day, and they're keen to share it. This is very different to some of the countries we operate in. Our journalists and editors in Berlin, for example, say that if they just want to pop out of the office and get a few quotes from Germans on the street aren't very keen to talk to them. I don't know if this is a sort of Italians being on one extreme or Germans being on the other extreme. I'm not sure, but it's really a great advantage for us here in Italy. So that's a sort of brief run through of who we are, what we've been doing, the good things, the bad things. And I thought now we could perhaps, if there are questions, answer questions, or have a bit of a discussion about what we've been doing. Sure, any questions? Yeah. Oh, I think someone's coming with a mic.
You can hear me? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Actually, I know the local. Been reading since you launched in I think it was in June 2013.
Yep.
I remember that time, and I do like it. I'm London-based, so I really know what you mean when you talk about the Italian culture and the British, or anyway, Northern European culture. And my question is, how can you see your office developing in a few years in Rome? Because I know that you're talking about your experience is kind of challenging for you and your colleague. You're working really hard. I can see it's a really, really nice website. And I was wondering about your plan for the future. How do you see your office in Rome expanding in the future?
Sure. So the locals model operates and has expanded on the fact that there are two people usually in our major markets, so that we have two people in Paris, in Madrid, in Berlin, here, for example. That's unlikely to change. So we're unlikely to expand and hire more and more journalists. What's more likely is that we'll go into more European markets, I would say. In terms of our coverage, I think that we're very much more open into, thankfully we now have a couple of years of knowledge, and so we're sort of building up, I would say, in doing more sort of in-depth coverage, perhaps. I know certainly that the first few months of the local Italy articles were shorter than they were after a year, for example. We're also looking into doing much more video content on our site, so that's an area of expansion. We're also sort of going in a lot more into how we source our data and look at Italy in numbers and sort of find some really pan-European stories in that way. So. Any other questions for the moment? No? Okay, so we'll leave it at that, and hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about the local. Thanks very much.